right. Good morning, and I want to welcome everybody to the 2021 CURT Safety Summit. My name is Chris Fouts. I am co-chair of the CURT Safety Committee, along with Joe Gianfried, or not Joe Gianfried. I'm looking right at Joe on the screen here. Sorry, Joe. Kevin O'Shaughney with Johnson & Johnson. And unfortunately, Kevin had some scheduling conflicts today, so he's unable to join us. But we're hoping to have had a face-to-face event this year, but as you know, COVID sort of had other plans for everybody around the globe. And knowing a lot of our membership still had travel restrictions in place, it was the prudent thing to do to go ahead and make this another virtual event. So I appreciate everybody's participation today. We do plan to have, or CURT is planning to have at least one face-to-face event this year. For sure, it will be the award ceremony in November. I believe it's in Cocoa Beach, Florida. So make sure you get that on your calendars. And speaking of awards and award ceremonies, we are currently accepting applications for our SICE Awards. SICE stands for Construction Industry Safety Excellence. So please check out the CURT webpage for more information and applications for the awards. I believe our deadline is the 10th of July this year, and the winners will be September with awards presentation at the awards gala in November. So today we've got a varied list of topics. For those of you who have done or haven't done so yet, you may want to go ahead and download the CURT app to your phones or mobile devices. The CURT app will have a listing of all of the presentations, speakers, their bios, as well as copies of their slide decks for you to review and use. So if you haven't done that already, you may want to go ahead and do so. But the agenda that we have today has a variety of topics. You know, with the world that we're in today, we've got a lot of different issues coming at projects at, you know, almost breakneck speeds anymore. And today's agenda sort of represents that. We have a little bit of everything from mental health and impairment due to recreational marijuana use. We've also got topics relating to, you know, fall protection equipment, also just in general on fall calculations, because that's because, as we know, falls are in the top 10 of OSHA's citation system. We also talk a little bit about fall protection for women, along with a section on diversity and equity, as well as inclusion as part of our safety management programs. So as you can see, we've got a variety of topics. And at this point, I would like to thank Joe Gianfried. Joe, thank you so much for helping pull everything together, coordinating speakers and getting all the slides put together. And I just want to say thank you. You've done a great job. And you were definitely the glue that kept us together when we had speakers that had to back out due to travel issues or schedule conflicts. Again, Joe, thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. And thanks for all the speakers stepping up and coming forward and making it easier for me and Chris both. So you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. So without any hesitation, let's go ahead and get started. Our first presenters for this morning are Teresa Magnus, who is principal consultant for Magnus & Company. Teresa has been long involved with CURT. I know I've been involved with CURT for about 6 or 7 years now, and Teresa's been around for as long as I've been around. So she started when she was a teenager. And and also Catherine Eli, who is a licensed counselor and a progress productivity coach. And they'll be talking a little bit about the design for mental wellness and how organizations can build resilient workforces. It's one thing that we've learned through COVID. Mental health awareness has become a top priority, and that our need for rapid change is we can do it. We're great at managing changes of all types, but mental health awareness has become a major issue, not only because of COVID, but also we realize that in the construction industry, and I'm sure the data is in there, is in the presentation, but about 4% of our construction workers are die due to suicide, due to mental health issues. So we do have an issue that's facing our workforce. As we know, we've already got a limited workforce, but adding those additional challenges makes it that much more complicated. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Teresa and Catherine. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. And I guess I'm okay now to share my screen.
Go right ahead.
Is it working?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, well, thank you for having us, and I'll let Catherine kick us off here on our topic.
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. It is so good to be with all of you today. So the suicide rate in construction is 3.7 times higher than the national average. So in this industry, there is so much emphasis on physical safety, and rightfully so, but it's time to pay attention to psychological safety and mental wellness. Construction workers are 6 times more likely to die by suicide than in workplace accidents. So if this is the case, what is it going to take for us to concentrate not just on thoughts and talk, but our efforts towards psychological safety in the workplace and a more resilient workforce? These are some suicide rates for individuals working in major industries. And as you can see, in construction, there are 45.3 males who die by suicide for every 100,000 workers and 9.4 females. So ill mental health does not just affect the individuals who are suffering from it. What impact does ill mental health have on our economy, our businesses? Now, these numbers are from Canada and Australia because our country is behind even studying this subject. So the World Health Organization estimates poor mental health costs the global economy $1 trillion annually in lost productivity. Studies in Canada and Australia estimate the cost of poor mental health in their countries' economies are 50 billion and 11 billion respectively. In fact, the same report projected that the cost of poor mental health in Canada will rise to 2.5 trillion by 2041. So it's clear that we have underinvested so far when it comes to mental health. So what can we do to move from a place where 33% of the construction industry workers suffer from anxiety, depression, or unmanageable stress? A place where 85% of the construction industry workers do not believe that the industry does enough to support mental health. Well, we build a resilient workforce. As defined, mental health is defined by the World Health Organization as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Normal stresses of life. Now, workers in this industry suffer from a different level of stress than the normal stresses of life. I think we can all agree to that. They, more than anyone, need to be armed with the tools to be resilient, to withstand and recover from difficult conditions. So we build a resilient workforce, a workforce that can cope not only with the normal stresses of life, but the normal stresses of this industry. You don't have to be born resilient. You can learn it and you can build it.
So this presentation provides a high-level overview of a roadmap to define and implement mental wellness programs for organizations. It is a very broad topic, and we've done the best we can to boil it down to an actionable roadmap that gets an organization started in the process. The first step in the roadmap is to assess the psychological safety of workplace. And I put workplace in quotes because that's changed a lot over the last year. Our workplace could now be a home office, could be the kitchen table, could also be a more traditional job site, corporate office, satellite office. So workplace, loosely defined now as the place where we're working. I'll start out with organizational culture. And we've talked about culture in industry and in business for a long time. And it is just that. The people who work for the organization have to feel like the organization actually cares and that this is a priority. And as part of the values and the expectations in the practice of the organization, components that create a fair, equitable organization make up that culture. And so an acknowledgement and an empathy towards mental health needs to be part of the corporate or the organizational culture. The next component is psychological and social support. So, really, it comes down to the last two sentences. Do workers feel like they are individuals in an organization? Are they valued and are they appreciated for the contributions that they're making to the organization? If you treat people like commodities, they will begin to disengage and they will struggle more than if they feel like they're individuals and they're being treated as individuals who are making individual contributions to an organization. Clear leadership and expectations. This is a very tough industry. It's tough for anybody. It's especially tough for women and minorities. And leadership lines are not always clearly defined. Having clear leadership and understanding the expectations for groups and for individuals, for projects, for crews, are all critical components to people feeling like they're doing well in their job. I used to joke, and it's not really a joke. I mean, people don't wake up and say, today I want to do a bad job. Most people wake up and say, I want to do a good job today. I want to make a meaningful contribution. And so they need to clearly understand who is in charge, who is the leader, and what are their expectations for their role. Civility and respect. It's interesting that we still talk about the need to reinforce civility and respect in our workplace, but we do. It's where we are. And so learning how to be a respectful organization, to treat everyone with respect, and to include them and their ideas in an organization is important for people to feel less stress and more involved, more engaged. Growth and development. And really, I think for our industry, the high point of this is avoiding people feeling stuck in dead-end jobs and having people feel as though they can improve their careers. They can grow and develop new skills, that there are continued learning opportunities for them, and that they have some control over their lives and their careers, with the opportunity to advance and to take on new responsibilities. Psychological demands of the job. So now we're going to really get into the meat and potatoes of psychologically safe workplaces in the construction and engineering industry. Just like skills for a position, certifications, licenses, education, that you would look for in creating a job description, it is important also to understand that that job has specific psychological demands, and then to acknowledge that not every person is capable of coping with all of the stresses of that position. And I think this is something that, especially in this industry, we overlook quite frequently. I mean, not everyone is designed to take on the stress of a construction manager position. Just because you have moved up in organizational responsibility, levels of responsibility, and now it's time for you to be promoted to construction manager does not mean that you have all of the coping mechanisms in place to be able to handle the stress of the deadlines and the workforce issues and the supply chain congestion and everything else that's thrown at a construction manager on a daily basis. And so it's important for organizations to understand that not every person is capable of coping with the stress of every position, and to understand the psychological demands and include that in the evaluation of candidates for positions. Recognition and reward, and this does include money, but it isn't all about money. Do you show appreciation, appropriate appreciation for your workers in your organization? Are they recognized in front of their peers, their reports, and their superiors for the contributions that they make? And does your company have a program that recognizes people and rewards them equally, regardless of any other factors other than their performance, right? Balance, another major issue for our industry. How do we encourage our workers to maintain a balance in their life, which is really how do we encourage them to spend less time at work? And so we have benefits in our organizations. You know, most people have health insurance now, but do you give people time to see their doctors? Do you encourage people to take their paid time off? Do you encourage people to take their breaks? Do you encourage people who have been in a stressful situation to take a little bit of time to themselves to recuperate, to recover from this stressful situation that they've just worked through? And so while it might seem counterintuitive that we would encourage people to work less, we're encouraging people to maintain balance in their lives, which is a critical component in maintaining good mental health. Involvement and influence. This component really talks about the ability of workers to contribute their ideas and to participate in the planning of work. And so while there are many examples we can give in management ranks, let's talk about craft for a minute, craft workers. Do the craft workers on your projects have an opportunity to contribute ideas or participate in the planning of their work? And can you imagine the stress that we put on a foreman of a crew where we have handed him a work order that someone else has planned, someone else has staged materials, someone else has pulled drawings, someone else has assigned him a crew, and you say, you're going to do this week. And what have we done? We've taken all of that person's ability away to contribute ideas. I mean, technically, he should be the expert in that position. Was he able to participate in the planning? And if not, is it even a workable plan? And so you hand this to the craft worker, and then you hold him accountable for executing it, whether he had any input or not. And we would not do this to another professional. I mean, nobody has ever said to me, you're going to read 300 pages of contract today. You're going to write, 6 memos and return 3 phone calls. Nobody gives another professional that level of work direction. So why would we do that to a craft worker and then turn around and beat him up that he wasn't able to, erect 400 pieces of scaffolding that day? And that flows right into workload management. A long time ago, a construction manager that I had a tremendous amount of respect for told me that if you staff a job at 80% of the manpower you needed, work people power. If you staff a job at 80% of what you need, then you will get the productivity out of your craft. And I thought, that's a good rule. I'm gonna stick with that my whole career. And that's wrong. We should not expect 80% of the required resources to produce 100% of the work. I mean, why would we put people in a situation, in that kind of stressful situation, where we're saying you're going to accomplish an impossible task and then beat them up when they miss schedule, when they need overtime, when they spend more money than they should, you know, when it was part of the plan all along. Psychological protection. And this really comes down to putting the same level of emphasis on mental health that we put on physical safety. Do our organizations treat mental safety with the same importance as physical safety? And, you know, thinking back to the statistic that Catherine gave us at the opening, you're 6 times more likely to commit suicide than to die in a workplace accident. Yet look at the emphasis we put on fall protection, you know, lockout, tag out. I mean, everything else that we put in our safety plans for projects, and we spend 0% putting in place. And this is an overarching generalization. I'm sure there are organizations participating today that do take mental health into consideration, but for the most part, our safety, our site safety, health and environmental plans focus primarily on physical safety and do not have a plan in place for mental wellness. And then the last component of engagement, last component of psychologically safe workplace is engagement. And so organizations where people are motivated achieve better results, and it's billions of dollars of results. But if you take a step back and look, you know, what is the greater good that is accomplished by having a more engaged workforce? And so this takes us into the next step in a roadmap for creating mental wellness, which is to conduct hazard analysis on the risk factors in your workplace. And not every risk factor can be eliminated. We know that about physical safety, and the same thing is true for mental safety, mental health. We are still organizations that have to earn a profit. And so everything can't be hearts and flowers every day. There are stresses that are not going to be eliminated. We are still going to have deadlines. We're still going to have issues that arise on projects. There are still factors of the industry that we can't control. And so how do we look at things that disrupt routines, interfere with relationships and community, create stress, overwork our individuals, and look at specific ways of mitigating those risks? And we'll come back to that in a little bit. So next, we're going to look at, in designing a wellness program, how to improve psychological safety factors in your workplace. What are the components that you would want to put in place?
So we have 2 major components that we're looking at today, and Teresa has talked to you a lot about the psychologically safety in the workplace. So one component is the organizational level component, changing what we can to improve psychological safety factors within an organization to lessen stress and create a workplace where individuals can thrive. The second component is the individual level, giving the individuals within the organization the tools to become resilient and cope with what we cannot change, the stresses that are inherent in the industry. So the organizational level components. Addressing mental health as a part of the workplace occupational health and safety management reduces stigma and encourages help-seeking behavior in relation to mental health. What does this mean? It means that if someone is having a mental health issue, they are no longer afraid to speak out and get the help that they need. So that is part of a psychologically safe workplace. There's health insurance, including mental health care. There's employee assistance program. There is an emergency plan, what to do if there is an emergency, but also how to prevent one from happening. There's personal finance education. Finances are a huge stressor. Stress about when and where the next job is coming from, whether you have enough money to make it to that next job, We need to educate workers on how to manage money to reduce this part of the stress. Communication and education of mental health. You know, communicate to reduce the stigma so that when the necessary services are in place to help those struggling, they're not scared to reach out. Educate so that workers are clear on how and what they can do to help themselves and how and when to reach out for help.
Can I stop you for a minute, Catherine? I'm getting a lot of voices feedback. Somebody, Chris, is there a way you can mute everybody? I don't know if others are hearing that, but I'm certainly hearing it. Sounds
And
like
I heard it occasionally, but
yeah.
Yeah, there's, let me, all right, everybody is muted at this point.
Thank you. All right, so let's talk about the individual level components. We're going to talk to you more about this in a minute, but we want to educate everyone about the 8 domains of a healthy and satisfying life. We want to adopt mindfulness routines to increase intention. When we work long hours and have very few left for the other parts of our life besides work, family, friends, leisure, we have to be mindful and intentional to make the most of that time so that we can be more satisfied with our lives. Tools to help people explore the obstacles preventing them from achieving balanced lives, which is uncovering any unhelpful thinking or cognitive distortions that might be in their way. Tools to help individuals adopt healthy habits and routines, tools to help people overcome bad habits and unhealthy coping strategies. All of these tools will help workers be resilient when the stressful part of the job occurs. So let's talk a little bit more about the 8 domains of a healthy life. Many occupational health initiatives in other countries have specifically focused on reducing sickness, presenteeism, or sickness absenteeism, which all present substantial costs to organizations. But it is becoming increasingly recognized that workers who are mentally and physically healthy are more productive. So we want to shift our attention from what we can do when these workers become mentally and physically ill, or how to fix the situation after it's broken, to how do we create overall well-being so that we prevent the problem. The goal becomes to create general well-being through a positive state of life satisfaction. If a worker is satisfied with his or her life, he or she will flourish in their jobs and bounce back or be resilient when stress happens. In other words, if you're satisfied with yourself and your life, you don't become anxious or depressed. You instead are a thriving, productive, resilient member of the workforce. Now, we have 8 domains or major areas of our lives, and work or career is just one of them. To have a positive state of life satisfaction, we must pay attention to and take action in all of the other 8 areas of our lives. So we use these 8 domains to foster and maximize the protective or resilience factors in individual employees. These 8 domains are: the first one is mental and physical well-being and self-care. Then there is intimate love relationship or marriage. There's parenting and family, friends and community, spirituality and faith, career and finances, learning and self-growth, and adventure, artistic expression, and leisure. Those are the 8 domains that make up a balanced and healthy life. So let's talk about the tools that we have to offer for overall mental wellness. So the Building Mental Wellness Workbook contains an acceptance commitment therapy-based 9-step sequence created to decrease or eliminate personal risk factors for ill mental health, the ones that you can't fix within the organization. while promoting protective factors that lead to resiliency and healthy coping skills. So it is a workbook that takes each individual through what I do with clients in my office individually and what works, proven by acceptance commitment therapy research. So here's a little bit about what the workbook takes you through. These are the 9 steps. So first, you determine the importance and satisfaction in each of the 8 domains of your life. So we look at how important is each individual area, and in that individual area, how satisfied are you? This is a great assessment to see exactly where you are in your overall life satisfaction. If you aren't satisfied in your individual domains, you're not satisfied and happy in your life. So then we uncover any internal roadblocks, any, excuse me, any limiting beliefs or cognitive distortions that could be getting in your way, leading you down the road to anxiety or depression. Then we create a new story where you really become aware and focus on all of the positive things about yourself. Then we let go of negative core beliefs, rigid rules, and limiting beliefs, which are the things that get us stuck, unhappy, and leading down the road to ill mental health. We talk about the ways that our mind keeps us stuck in our comfort zone and how to work outside of that comfort zone to be more satisfied in life, to increase self-value, to really figure out what's most important in our lives and what we want to be known for, how to be intentional with our time toward what is important to us, and then how to stay on your path toward mental well-being, feeling in control of your life, and creating new healthy habits. So completing this workbook helps you strengthen social connectedness through work, in your marriage, in your parenting and family, with your friends and community. It increases self-esteem and self-worth by becoming aware of your negative core beliefs, your rigid rules, letting them go, and by understanding exactly what is important to you and taking action toward it. Improve positive self-image, recognizing and letting go of these limiting negative beliefs while focusing on the most positive parts of yourself and your strengths. It helps increase the feeling of control over your own life. Uncertainty creates anxiety. Awareness of what is important to an individual and taking authentic action toward it removes uncertainty and replaces it with a sense of control. So right where the workbook leaves off, we pick back up with the Blueprint to Thrive Values Journal and Organizer. The Organizer is designed to support resiliency through healthy habits, goal setting, and intentional action toward what is most important. So education really doesn't get us anywhere without action, and the Organizer and Journal is all about taking action. It includes the building blocks of mental and physical well-being, reminders for physical checkups and screenings, how to plan a healthy diet, exercise, morning and weekly mindfulness routines that help you be very intentional with your time that you have left over from when you're not at work. Further education and implementation of what creates mental well-being. So it's time management, planning for the future, setting goals and maximizing productivity, and important dates and occasions to remember. Every component of each book is designed to build a resilient workforce who can not only withstand the extraordinary pressure and stress of the industry, but to flourish within it.
Okay, so the next step in our roadmap is to design mitigating strategies for the hazards to mental health that cannot be eliminated. And so we've talked about both the individual and the organizational components to a mental wellness program. And while Catherine has reviewed the tools that Domain Wellness Partners has developed for individuals, it's important then that as organizations, as we're looking at the hazards of our workplaces, that we continue to support the healthy habits that individuals are trying to adopt. And so I've picked out two just to give examples of risk mitigation strategies, because this is a very individual process. I mean, every organization is going to have to look at themselves and look at their different work environments and to complete their own hazard analysis. These are two that are pretty typical in our industry. So one risk would be jobs staffed with travelers. So we frequently require travel to job sites. Unfortunately, all of our plants can't be built in the same city where our engineering and construction offices are located. So we have to travel, and we travel the construction management teams on our projects. And so one strategy for that is to plan rotations to give both site management and craft extended weekends for travel home. Travel pay and incentive pay coinciding with the long weekends will help them be able to afford the time that they need to go home. I mean, we're not going to eliminate travel from our industry. So understanding that the risk of travel can't be eliminated, what strategies can we implement to help people go home and take care of, balance to the best they can, the other aspects of their life. And then also looking at travel is the impact that it has on the healthy routines and the health and wellness of the workers. So again, with travel, and I pick on travel, there's a lot of literature out there about the impacts of travel on people's physical and mental well-being. And for people who have traveled their entire careers, you've experienced it. And so looking at travel impact, on the corporate traveler side, there is a lot that an organization can do to negotiate broader programs to encourage their workers who are traveling to plan either less disruptive travel schedules or to encourage them to maintain the healthy routines that they've built for themselves by eating healthier meals, by building workouts into their travel schedules, avoiding missing important dates and things of that nature. How do you maintain the balance that you're working so hard to do with your building mindful routines for your life and still balance your corporate travel? For long-term job sites, we may, as organizations, want to look at developing job site residence. So we know that travelers are required to work our projects, to build our projects. We're going to bring sometimes 3,000 and 5,000 people from all regions of the country to a job site in a remote location. And they're in a travel trailer or sharing hotel rooms. And they've been completely pulled out of daily routines and pulled away from their community and their relationships. And so a strategy for long-term job sites is to build a residence that allows them to adopt or maintain healthy living with having balanced meals, access to exercise equipment, community activities, continuing education, some sort of healthcare. And if we were planning a project in a foreign country, we would set up the traditional man camp, worker camp. We would set up a worker camp if we were taking people abroad, but somehow if we're going to take them to some remote town in Iowa or a very remote place in Louisiana, we don't afford them the same opportunity to live in a healthy work camp environment. And when you look at the benefits to not just to the individual, but to the organization of having mentally and physically healthy people on your job sites, the return on investment starts to become a little bit easier. And so that's, the other half of the evaluation equation. So the next step in our roadmap is the communication, and the communication is critical because this is something that is going to be very new to people. A lot of education is needed about the importance of mental wellness and the level of effort that it's going to require on the part of the individual. I mean, you can't make a person want to be happier, but you can give a person the tools and the support that they need to become happier. Educating people on mental illness and the signs and symptoms. I mean, there are a lot of red flags that lead up to the suicidal statistics. It didn't happen overnight. And, while we may or may not want to accept the responsibility, the industry doesn't attract crazy people. It attracts people who love construction and engineering, and it's the risk factors that we talk about that create this mental ill health. The next step in the communication is to address the stigma surrounding mental health in the workplace. It's an uncomfortable topic, especially in an industry driven by the tough guy attitude. People are not going to want to willingly have conversations about how do you feel today, and that stigma has to be overcome. People have to understand that mental health is just as important as physical safety, and that it is something that we all need to be responsible for. And then, of course, sharing resources to make the programs that your organization develops for employees also available for their family members. The key performance indicators, KPIs that we're all used to, can be monetized in many instances. Catherine has referred to absenteeism and presenteeism. Absenteeism is a huge issue in the construction industry. How do we get people to show up to work every day? Presenteeism is people showing up and just not getting anything done. And it's in the field, but it's also in our offices. I mean, how many times has somebody shown up and spent a whole day in a cubicle and really literally accomplished nothing? And so looking at the return on your investment in mental health, the direct costs are the costs to organizations for not having mental health programs. Happy, healthy people come to work every day, and people who are struggling take more time off, and that's proven in study after study after study. And so if we want people to come every day and we want people to produce work every day, we have to help them take care of their mental health. Short-term and long-term disability. The #1 growing claim is mental health. So all of the insurance companies sat up and took notice of this years ago, because this is the fastest growing claim in their industry, mental health. And again, that's a cost to our organization, but it's also has a negative impact on our organization when people leave the workplace because they need to deal with this mental health disability. Unemployment insurance, employee turnover, the cost of managing people who are struggling, incident costs. Incident, it's kind of like a nice term for a high energy event, an explosion at a plant. An incident like an active shooter. How expensive is that for your organization? Healthcare costs, and then productivity impact. I mean, when one person is absent from a project team or from a crew in the field, what is the impact to the project? What is the impact to the rest of the crew? And then you have all your indirect costs. How does this impact the culture of your organization? Toxicity, toxic environments. I mean, the term is thrown around quite a bit, but do people like coming to work at your organization? Do they feel valued? All of those things are the touchy-feely part of this and harder to quantify than these direct costs. But these are your KPIs. If you want to measure how well your mental health program is working, here are the KPIs to do that. Can you improve your absenteeism rates on your project sites by spending some time, any amount of time, talking about mental health and giving your workers access to the resources they need to help them improve their personal mental health. And then as an organization, making sure that you are fostering a psychologically safe workplace, because an employee can put as much time into becoming healthy as they want to. If they come to work 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day and are in an unsafe environment, psychologically unsafe environment, they're not going to be able to achieve good mental health. And again, Canada and Australia are ahead of us in this respect. They have not only implemented, but spent years studying the results. And these are two very good respected firms, PricewaterhouseCoopers and Deloitte & Touche. They're calculating 230 and 400% returns on the investments made in mental health programs for organizations. And, you know, Bell Canada is a utility company. They have a lot of field work. That's probably a very good indicator of where the construction industry would be. If we can get everybody to come to work every day and work productively and work safely, can we return $4 for every dollar we invest in these mental wellness programs? But a couple other indicators for all our public company participants today. Public companies with mental health programs outperform the S&P 500 index. And they also better align with shareholder ESG priorities, ESG being the environmental, social, and governance priorities that are now being measured by Wall Street. So a final thought for us, you know, COVID has changed a lot about everybody's industry, but about our industry, and it's given us all an opportunity to pause. I'm sure, like myself, everyone has had an opportunity to think about their careers, think about their relationships and their lives. This is the most amount of time I've ever spent with my husband, and he told me that I wasn't that bad. This wasn't this bad being married to me. And so that was a good thing. After 12 months with me, he still thinks I'm a keeper. So, you know, we have an opportunity here to reimagine our industry. I mean, more than ever, our people are going to need us. People who were laid off for extended periods of time during COVID, coupled with all the stress caused by COVID, are going to need a lot of support coming back into the workforce. You know, happy people work better, contribute more, they cause less problems at work, but they're also much better members of community. And so as an industry, we tackled physical safety, and we've done a great job. I mean, look at the successes that we've achieved over the last couple decades. You know, my challenge to the group is, what could we achieve if we put the same level of effort into mental wellness that we put into physical safety?
All right. Excellent presentation. Excellent presentation. In fact, that was the next question I was getting ready to ask. We noticed that you had put the Blueprint to Thrive in your presentation. How can we get copies of that book if we're interested in it?
So both of these books are available through every bookseller, 200 different booksellers, okay. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. But, you know, I think it can go one step further. We did publish independently. You'll notice a Brent Darnell International logo on the back of these books. Using an independent publisher gives us more flexibility in working with organizations. So if you personally wanted to order the materials, they're available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon and everyone else. If your organization was interested in adopting these materials, they can be customized for your organization. Your leadership could put messages inside. You can co-brand the materials, and especially when it comes to the Blueprint to Thrive organizer, we can customize that for your organization, and specifically based on the programs that you develop with respect to developing a psychologically safe workplace, but also your own hazard analysis of your workplaces.
That is awesome. So I was scrolling down through the chat box, and some folks were making some comments, and one that I absolutely agree with is around the stigma with mental health, especially here in the U.S. And you also mentioned that Canada and Australia have they're years ahead of us in a lot of this stuff. What can we do to help limit that stigma? I know that right now we've got at least 5 different generations working in the workplace right now, everything from the traditionalists to the baby boomers to the Gen X, Gen Y millennials, and Gen Z. There is a lot of stress, and that stress can lead to mental health issues as well. So what can we do immediately?
Well, I'll tell you this. It was the thinking behind the development of the workbook, because it's really easy to say you need to see a counselor. And, Catherine has a full practice of people who have made the investment in working with a counselor. But, for our industry, one, if you're traveling, it would be difficult to participate in weekly, meetings. But I just think that it's going to be that's just too big of a step all at one time. And so the thinking behind the workbook was really to give people a self-guided, private way to receive acceptance commitment therapy without having to go to see a counselor. Because while we talk about suicide a lot, I mean, really, there's a long path to get there. It's just like our safety triangle. I mean, for so many unsafe acts, you have so many first aids, you have so many recordables, and then fatalities. I think that if we looked at mental health in the same way, I mean, for every unsafe behavior, unhealthy behavior that we have people who begin to experience anxiety and depression and leading up to suicide. And so, I think if we take this program across the board, to everyone, not trying to handpick people. I mean, everybody could be happier in their life. Everybody could spend more time focusing on other domains in their life that maybe they've put on a side burner for too long.
Yeah, can I have it there when you're done?
Yeah. So, and one more thing on that, if I think about the implementation of safety belts, Bechtel gave safety belt #1 to the alpha on the job site, right? And said, we need you to wear this safety belt and get out there. And to a certain extent, with respect to overcoming the stigma here, I think it's the same thing. You have to pick very well-respected people in organizations and say, we need you to lead on this. We need you to be, safety belt #1.
And so just providing employees with these 2 tools goes a long way to showing them that you value them, showing them that you value mental health, and it removes some of the stigma, all without having to even say a word. So I think it's valuing employees and workers with our actions first. And that really will start the conversation and help remove some of the stigma.
Chris,
So
I was
getting ready to say, let me open the floor to
Okay.
questions. Go ahead.
All right, good. Catherine and Teresa, thank you very much for the presentation. Is this something that you're going to be presenting at conferences, whether it be CURT or CII or SCORE or whatever, any different organizations? And my next question is this something, what I'd like to do is get more in depth with you on this. Is this something that we can take, because I can see the benefit for our clients, our major clients, well, all clients, but, because even our smaller clients of, 20 or 30 people still have this same issue going on within their businesses. So that's my 2 questions.
So yes and yes. God bless you. God willing, we will be traveling and going to conferences, because although I love my family, it's time to spend some time in a hotel in another city from all of them. And
That's right,
I'm sure they feel the same way about me too. I hope we're back at conferences again. I mean, we do want to get the word out. I mean, one thing that CURT has always done is encouraged people to put tools in the hands of others, right? And so these are tools that could be plugged into organizations' existing environmental health and safety program. And so, yes, we want to present at conferences, and yes, we would like to work with you on supporting you and your clients in implementing this. I could see this plugging in very well to safety blueprint, owner safety blueprint. I could see this plugging into existing environmental health and safety program. I mean, our intent was to give you not just ideas and words, but to give you tools that you could plug in.
That's the key, the tools. You hit the nail on the head right there, having the tools. I mean, we can talk all day long, but when you have the tools and you have that, which is great, that's where it's at. Thank you.
Any other questions? We have a few minutes remaining.
Hey, this is Carol Higgin with Siemens. Just to add in a couple of things. Thank you so much, Teresa and Catherine, for the great presentation and great material. Looks like it's a fantastic product. A couple of comments. One, being that it's Mental Health Month here in the U.S., it's a great timing for this topic, and hopefully everybody's taking advantage of that and doing things to promote the topic in their work environment. The modern movement into EHS and to safety on the project is something called Safety Differently, or Safety 2, where we're really focusing on a lot of things like, a lot of human performance, but less on employee, you did this wrong, I need you off the project now. More on the aspect of how do you as a company look at a situation that you have an employee in. I gave an employee a less than desirable task. I gave them less than desirable equipment to work with, and then expected them to work error-free for the entire time. How do you move into that? So this is a great topic. I love the blueprint concept for this, but this is really a great alignment to the modern safety movement of going into the Safety 2, Safety Differently. So really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I sort of like that Safety 2 thought approach. I really do. We've got Blueprint 2.0 that they're not Blueprint, but I can't remember the exact 2.0 that CURT is working on. It's slipping my mind right now, but we've definitely got to rethink the way that we do business. We got to rethink. I agree on the human performance side. We need to get into the mind. What was the thought process at the time of the incident? There's been times where individuals that I've worked with that said, you know what, my baby was in the ER last night until 3 in the morning. I really shouldn't have come to work today. My head's not in the game. And you go back to the old phrase, fit for duty. And back 20 years ago or 28 years ago, when I got involved in safety, that meant, was the guy showing up drunk? I mean, was he fit to come into work? Now that phrase, fit for duty, has gone from, is he impaired, to what's his mindset? Does he, you might be able to notice that he or she are just not themselves for the day. And so we've got to change that mindset too. Are they fit for duty mentally as well? So Catherine and Teresa, I thank you guys so much for the presentation. It was fabulous. We are definitely looking forward to the opportunity to get back in a room with everybody, and whether or not you shake hands, bump fist, or whatever, looking forward to that day. And hey, Teresa, just so you know, after about the first 2 months of COVID and being in quarantine, my wife asked me if I didn't have a place to go. So, so I can somewhat relate.
We have a chapter dedicated to relationships, Chris, in the.
I may need yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
So moving on to our next topic, it's on self-retracting devices. As you know, there are a variety of self-retracting devices. It seems like every week a new type of device is being introduced into the field. Along with these devices, though, a lot of our especially owner groups are becoming more involved in making sure that we have accurate fall calculations for the work that's getting ready to be done. I recently, as recent as January, had a situation where you know, a person was working along a leading edge, but it wasn't a direct straight on leading edge. They were actually right along this, having the accurate clearance calculations for that work. So, and I think Dan actually helped us a little bit at Merck reviewing a particular type of retractable that was on site. And we found out that it was an off-brand, not even generic, but it was one of the lesser known models. So with that, and falls being in our OSHA's top 10 on violations, we thought it was important to go ahead and include fall protection and a basic understanding of those fall calculations as part of today's presentations. So I would like to introduce Dan Kane. Dan is basically, I believe you're the subject matter expert for HazTech on fall protections. I believe your official title's Director Consulting.
Correct.
All right. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dan. And if anybody has questions throughout, please feel free to type them into the chat box, or you know, just hit the unmute yourself and feel free to ask.
So, Chris, I just share my screen here. Is that what I do?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. All right. Everybody see the slide deck up?
Yep, it's up now.
Okay. All right. I'm not our most advanced virtual presenter within the company, but I'm not too bad here. Thanks, Chris, for the introduction. So again, my name's Dan Kane. I'm Director of Consulting for HazTech. If some of you know me, you probably know I don't really like the term subject matter expert. I would probably, for fall protection, I probably prefer the term nerd, fall protection nerd. A little less confrontational, I guess. But so yeah, I have a background. I've been in the safety thing now since, gosh, 1989. I started working for a small distributor selling safety products back when the term value added, when you did consultations, when you sold it, was still popular. When distributors actually acted like distributors, they added value to their clients. And then I actually went on to, we were acquired by one of the nation's largest safety distributors, and then I migrated into fall protection manufacturers. So I spent almost half of my career working for fall protection manufacturers in some of those capacities, helping design products. I sat on product development teams for retractable lifelines and developed Miller fall protection. Honeywell, they're actually the harness platform that they use as the basis for all of their, I think about 95% of their harnesses. So, and then went back into distribution and started a safety division for a company in Philadelphia, which we became the largest safety distributor for construction industry, one of the largest on the East Coast, certainly largest in the Mid-Atlantic region. And then eventually worked our way into selling freestanding rooftop guardrail systems, became the largest dealer of freestanding guardrails in North America. So became a subject matter nerd in that category. But in any case, one of the things over the course of my travels is, and Chris, you alluded to this, is the misapplication and the misunderstanding of self-retracting lifelines, which sort of ANSI's throwing us a curveball right now, they're sort of trying to remove the acronym SRLs. We all got used to, transitioning, maybe I'm showing my age, but going from yo-yos or blocks to fall limiters, yo-yos, retractables. We got used to the term SRLs, and then the ANSI committee decided that they wanted to use the term SRD. So us safety people, we love acronyms, and here's a new one, right? So and it's sort of funny because as we name this program, not all SRDs are created equal. When we first started offering it a few years ago, people were asking, what's an SRD? Self-retracting device. But it's the term's supposed to be more all-encompassing. What changed in the industry? Back in 2012, the ANSI Z359 committee released a new standard for retractables. And what it did is it set some new performance criteria that you see here. And everyone seems to know, I'm going to go to sort of maybe pointer mode here. A lot of people are familiar with, what a Class A is in terms of max arrest distance of 24 inches, or maybe Class B, max arrest distance of 54 inches. But they don't really understand what's happening to the values in terms of loading and the term average arresting force. And here you have a Class A retractable. And by the way, this is only for overhead anchorage. Why did I say it like that? There's a very specific reason why I say it like that, right? These values, 24-inch arrest distance when tested overhead, 54-inch arrest distance when tested overhead. That's important to recognize because when these devices are anchored so that free fall is possible, one, they may not be able to be used, and two, those arrest distances may change and the forces may change. But here's something you may not know. How about, do you folks operate in mobile elevating work platforms? We're starting to see a large preponderance of this ladder's last policy, which is meaning we're starting to see a pretty big migration and integration of push around lifts, mast lifts. A lot of mast lifts have anchor points that are qualified anchor points, meaning they're not designed for 5,000 pounds and they're not designed for arrest forces of 1,350 pounds. Some of the anchor points on mast lifts are qualified as anchor points for devices or connecting systems that limit max arrest force to 900 pounds or less. So that's something that is new to a lot of people that see this program. So you do want to be careful about what devices you use as your safety systems and mobile elevating work platforms. You use a device, you think it's safe, and then you find out later it's wrong. Here's some of the other stuff that's going on with this, right? So there's an environmental conditioning component to this ANSI Z359 standard. So the max arrest forces, environmental conditioning means cold conditioning. So when these devices are used outside or left outside, which in a lot of fixed facilities they are, you see these devices for unloading freight cars or for unloading tractor trailers or flatbeds, or just retractable lifelines that are hanging outside for long durations, years at a time. You're going to find out the Class A retractable has a maximum average arresting force. Yes, these are terms that they use. Maximum average arrest force, 1575. Maximum arrest force of 1250. Oh, by the way, why is this important here to know these forces? There are facilities that I go into. There's probably a customer or two of mine in this meeting right now that has cold boxes in their facilities. And some of those cold boxes have anchor points above them that are bar joists or D-bolt anchors or T-bars or I-beams that straddle a couple bar joists or attached to structure, you might find out that that anchor point was designed by an engineer, a qualified person, to support a device that has a max arrest force of 900 pounds, 1,800 pounds, or 1,350 pounds. Meaning you can't just attach anything to it. You have to make sure that you marry the device, the connecting system, to the anchor point rating. It's one of the reasons why we want to see leave in place permanent anchor points with labels on it that tell you, oh, this is only rated for devices that have a max arrest force of 900 pounds. So you should be aware of that. And that's one of the reasons why we see facilities decommissioning their anchor points or not allowing these anchor points to be used. Not that I want to be negative, but there are a lot of posers in the fall protection integrator world. These are companies that were acting as experts, acting as qualified people, but really were not. And we're providing inappropriate anchor points, not properly rated, not properly evaluated, and not properly engineered. And it's a fairly common occurrence, all right? So there, you know, what most people think about Class A, Class B are the arrest distances. They really don't think about loading the arrest distances. How do I calculate my required fall clearance distance? Well, when you're anchored overhead like this, it's pretty easy. If you have a Class A retractable, you really, by the way, in this scenario, you have 0 fall distance. You don't have any free fall distance. What you have, the way ANSY's worked this out, see, years ago, you had a device, had a deacceleration distance. And that didn't account for how the distance it took for the pawls to engage the braking system and then deploy. ANSY now says, we're going to combine. What distance? Do you travel 6 inches before that device locks up, engages the pawls, and then the pawls spin to have attenuation? That is all accounted for. So when ANSY says the max arrest distance is 24, it's the distance that you travel to engage the braking system, and then the distance it takes to dissipate the forces. Class A is 24 inches. Class B is 54 inches or 4.5 feet. So if you're calculating, it's pretty simple, right? It's either 24 inches plus whatever safety factor you feel comfortable designating, whether you want to use the manufacturer's safety factor or whether you as an employer or your client sets its own safety factor. So safety factors can be a combination of D-ring, slide, harness stretch, and a safety factor. But you should be aware of how is that safety factor calculated? Do you want to use a manufacturer right now? Chris, for instance, Merck uses 3 foot, and that's a combination of a safety factor and your D-ring slide, right? So we do have some people try to use a manufacturer's required safe clearance distance. What's published in your manual may not intertwine with what you want as a client or host facility. That's where some contractors make mistakes on filling out their JSAs or elevated work permits. It gets to be a little more complicated because these people here, they have an anchor point that's above them. They both experience 0 free fall distance, but they both have different required safe clearance distances. And that's because this person here, their body has to unfold. Here, 0 fall distance. It's all about either applying 24 inches or 54 inches, and then whatever safety factor. So the best way to know how to calculate this is you're going to have to, if a person is kneeling, you're going to have to add your maximum arrest distance, which is usually published on the label of your retractable, your safety factor, and then whether you're kneeling. If it's a Class B, you got 54-inch arrest distance, 36-inch safety factor, and 7.5 feet of kneeling. If you're laying down, a little bit of a different story. I'm sorry, 24-inch max arrest distance, plus 36 inches for kneeling gives you a 5 foot required safe clearance distance if you're kneeling. Class B, 4.5 feet plus 3 feet. Your required safe clearance distance for a Class B retractable when anchored overhead is 7.5 feet. When laying down, it changes. This is where a lot of people are starting to make mistakes, right? This is even before we get to adding anything for the swing fall factor, all right? So some manufacturers will give you charts so that you don't have to do, anybody know what this is? If you're Nigel Ellis, you call it the Ellis rule. If you've gone to high school geometry, you call it the Pythagorean theorem, right? It's the Pythagorean theorem. And by the way, this is the most appropriate way to calculate. I've seen some people calculate your swing fall factor when A is the height of your anchor point to the walking working surface. The most appropriate way to calculate is A is the anchor point height above the back D ring. And then you add your work excursion distance. So you take A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And then whatever your hypotenuse becomes, you subtract that from A, and that's going to give you your distance, your cable distance or webbing distance of your SRD before deployment. So whatever that factor is, that's your swing fall factor. You then add that into one of those previous calculations. So if you had a swing fall factor of 4 and you were kneeling, your required safe clearance distance is now 9. If you were laying down, it's now 13.5 feet if your swing fall factor was 4, right? Easy way to do it. This was pilfered from Fall Tech. I should have given them credit in this slide, but they've done a very nice job of showing you their math. All right, it's like my kid comes home and she hasn't shown her math, but the answer was correct and the teacher took off credit. They get full credit because she didn't show her work. Well, here we go. We show our work, right? If you're using a Class B retractable, 54 inches, 4.5 feet, you see where I'm saying dorsal D-ring shift, safety factor? That's 2.5 feet. Some people require, some client or host facilities require that number to be a combined number of 3. But anyway, the total minimum is 7 feet. Now you add your swing fall factor. This is where you got to pay attention, where people are making mistakes, is that they're not using the manufacturer's charts, vary by manufacturer. But what this is asking is what is the SRD anchorage height above the dorsal D ring? So if it was 10 foot from here to here, and the worker is, say, 6 feet tall, this back D ring is approximately 5 feet. So that means 5 feet to here. You can see the pointer, and 5 feet to here. So that's 5 foot above the dorsal D ring. Now, if my work excursion distance is 4 feet, my swing fall factor is 4. That means I put 4 in here, and my my required safe clearance distance is now 11 feet. By the way, what I really like about this chart is white is okay, gray is cautionary, and dark gray is don't do it without a PE evaluation, or I should say qualified person evaluation. So you see what they're saying here. Fall Tech says is that you shouldn't, if your anchor point is only 5 feet above the dorsal D ring, you should not be moving 6 foot laterally. You should stop at 4. That's an eye opener to a lot of people. You plug some numbers into a Miller, the Miller app that a lot of people use. You're going to find out that that number, work excursion, when standing is only going to be 2 feet. Oh, you don't have the mobility you think you have. And it changes, right? When you go, this is again, remember, for overhead anchors. I'm going to keep rolling and we can save the questions for the end, Chris, unless you think are you getting any questions that should be addressed?
So far, no questions.
Okay.
The only comment was Kathy Dobson said she loves the Ellis factor.
She knows Nigel probably, right? Right. Nigel creates his own rules. Good man. SRLLE, right? This is a leading edge retractor, which I wish they came up with a different term, because we use SRLLEs more often for unprotected edges than we do for leading edges. And a roof edge is an unprotected edge, not a leading edge. Look that up. Because a leading edge is constantly changing. You know, it's moving. An unprotected edge doesn't move. But ANSI has not set a maximum deacceleration distance for SRL LEs when used for foot level tie-off. Now, that's not to say many of these are Class A or Class B retract. Most of them are probably Class B, so that when used overhead, they probably have a max arrest distance of 54 inches. So you're seeing some manufacturers saying, oh, we have an SRL LE that's a hybrid, or an SRL hybrid. What's a hybrid? A hybrid sometimes means, oh, when used overhead, it performs like an ANSI Class A. Oh, okay. So you really have to pay attention, not just to the label, you got to pay attention to the manual now. And I do have people want to kill me when I'm going into these classes. Dan, you need to make it easy. I'm like, no, I don't. The manufacturers of this stuff need to make it easy for you, right? So I think ANSI's next step, if there's anyone in this group that's involved with the ANSI committee, is to really sort of harmonize the manuals, because the manuals are all over the place. You have SRL LEs, right? You see this is red here and this is yellow. Some are sharp edge rated and some are not sharp edge rated. Some are subdued edge. I'm a subdued dude, right? I mean, these are terminology that these manufacturers are now using. They're all over the place. So you really do need to pay attention. By the way, I was auditing a job site one day and I asked the fellow that was in the aerial lift, I said, do you know what this is? He said, those are my trauma suspension straps. I said, you need some training, buddy. I said, that is your external energy absorber. You see this black pack here? That's an external energy absorber, external energy absorber, external energy absorber. That is the energy absorber that follows the worker over the edge in case of a fall. And that's what ANSI wants to see. You do have manufacturers that say, I have an ANSI compliant retractable, but it may be missing this. See the terminology, ANSI compliant. Oh, it's not ANSI compliant. It meets the intent of the ANSI standard because, oh, it meets the European standard for sharp edge testing, and the European standard doesn't require the energy absorber on the end of the retractable, and the ANSI requires the energy absorber for a leading edge to be here and requires it to be non-detachable. These devices used to be available with a detachable energy absorber, and some manufacturers still have them. By the way, what's the definition of a sharp edge? There's a perfect pictorial stolen from Faltech's product manual. They've done the nicest job explaining it. If it's a concrete edge, metal deck edge, or a beam, I would urge you to classify it as a sharp edge. All right. What is SRLLE? What makes it different? How's it separated? The test weight is raised 5 foot above, let's say, the walking working surface, and then dropped. There's actually a test where it's off center as well, 5 foot off center test. And that's to test the cable so as it rolls along the edge. So ANSI also requires a certain pictograms. How can it be used? You see that it can be used on an angle here, an angle here. I wish they would more define this, but this would be an example of an anchor point that's at roof level with a parapet or curb. Now you understand why manufacturers of roof carts also sell baskets or trays to hold their retractables to get it elevated above that 6-inch high curb. Because if it's setting on the roof deck level, and there's a parapet or curb, it is non-compliant. All right. We have mechanical contractors that are climbing in pipe racks, ductwork, interstitial spaces. They encounter this scenario, right? You also, with leading edge retractables, need to observe the setback distance requirement. Some SRLLEs have 0 setback, could be positioned right here. Some are going to have 5, some are going to have 2. Follow it. All right. Be sure to read the fine print. So this is where we're getting into people really, really making the mistakes. And I realize I'm running out of time, but you have to be like some manufacturers, it's clear in the label, but here, is this clear? When SRD is anchored, overhead maximum deployment is either going to be Class A or Class B, 5442. So this would be a Class B retractable. However, when SRD is anchored so that free fall is possible, that would be free fall is possible. The bearing length of that device is going to be about that long. So if you're anchored at back D-ring height and you're anchored to a post or column right next to where you're standing, free fall is possible. This means not just at foot level, but so that free fall is possible. That's almost 10, that is 10 feet right there, folks. Maximum deployment or arrest distance is now 10 feet. Wow. Without any swing fall factor added to it. How about Faultech has a device when anchored at foot level, let's say to a beamer, an ironworker standing on a beam flange, attached to a beamer, it's 145 inches. Any mathematicians out there? What's that equal in terms of feet, right? So there's an example. How do we calculate required safe clearance distance in this application? You have setback distance of your anchor point. You have expanded work zone or lateral movement. You need to know those, right? So I've seen people so many times not calculate this properly. You have to find out what your hypotenuse is here before you can calculate this hypotenuse. So it's a multi-step process. I got to first do A squared plus B squared to get to C squared, right? Once I do that, now I have my A distance. I already know my B distance. That's, am I standing or am I hands and knees? We've had to write fall protection plans where people had to crawl out to the edge because that's the only way to do it on a 20-foot tall roof in some cases, right? With where the anchor point is. But this is the way you got to calculate it. And then your last step in that process is now you could take C minus A. That's going to give you the distance of cable that is over the edge of your walking working surface before deployment or maximum arrest distance is added. Now, I will caution you, that number does not take into account how much of the cable or webbing races back into the housing during the fall event. And the cable does race back in at foot level. But this is where people struggle because a lot of manufacturers don't give you proper charts to do this calculation, right? So I think this was one of the first ones that I found that I loved it, right? So at a 5-foot setback distance, this manufacturer has a 110-inch maximum arrest distance. It's starting to run the calculation. So you take your anchor point is at minus 5 feet. Your work excursion distance is 8. Now you have a 4-foot safe swing fall factor. You add that into your chart, and now you have a 20.5-foot required safe clearance distance. No kidding, 20.5 feet. So this is where a lot of people make a mistake. And by the way, if they had that anchor point and they had the 145-inch maximum arrest distance, now it changes into 23.5 feet. You see where people are on a single-story building and they could still hit the ground, right? So people are buying devices based on the information that's contained within the product manual, because now you have a work excursion distance of 8 feet, right? Of setback distance, let's say it's 5 feet, work excursion distance of 8. Can't do 8, but you can do 6, 15.8 feet. You see how it's improved? One of the things this product manual doesn't tell you, it doesn't tell you whether there's any safety factor committed to it. Same manufacturer, right? Lateral edge distance, we're trying to go 8 feet. Setback distance is 5. We can't go 6 feet. We can only go 5 feet. This is the Falcon as opposed to the Mighty Light. So same brand of retractable, 2 different product manuals. What I like about this product manual tells me that it's added a safety factor. You want to get accurate, there you go. But you got to also watch that those were Miller products. This is DBI. So DBI, it gets to be a little confusing how you use the data. This chart here, you would use it when safe clearance is 10 foot or greater. So when B is 10 foot or greater, but I've seen this a lot of times, by the way, when I survey jobs. Everyone likes to calculate from here to here, but not from the instruction, which is the gang box, the generator, the spill kit that's stationed next to the building, the new equipment that's put in. Oh, the picnic bench that's pushed up. Do we want to count the shrubbery? I mean, that's what happens. But here, you see what they're doing? It's from the walking work. Your A is from the walking working surface. And then it allows you for lateral movement. At 7.5 feet of lateral movement, I need a required safe clearance distance of 6 feet. So you got to be careful how you use the charts and the product manuals. So I'm going to wrap it up. I went over 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's quite okay, Dan. I mean, there's a lot of great information, and I can't stress the importance of, you know, making sure that the workforce understands, you know, the importance of these fall calculations. You know, fall protection's come a long way since I've been in construction. Used to, you only had to worry about, okay, am I tied off overhead because I'm not going to go beyond this? And of course, we know as human behavior, we don't always stay in the same place. So, you know, people move, and the technology has gotten better over the years. So one thing that I've noticed with the presentation today, a common theme is we need to try to get all of the manufacturers speaking the same language or just using the same nomenclature. So we actually do have an observer for ANSI Z359 that's on the call with us right now. That's Kathy Dobson. So that her Ellis comment proved to fruition there. So, but she said she's willing to take that back to the team and discuss some of these things that we've discussed in the meeting here. So is there any other questions that anybody has? If you do, please feel free to unmute your mic.
Great job, Dan.
So
Good stuff.
Not hearing any other questions. We are due for about a 30-minute, we're calling it a networking break. I think it's going to be more, you know, run to the restroom and grab a quick bite to eat, depending upon where you're at. And we will resume again at 1 o'clock.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Nice
everyone.
job, Dan.
Hey, great job, Dan. I appreciate it. Thank you.
thanks,
Sounds
folks.
good. See everybody soon.
I did call that audible right, Joe, correct?
Correct.
I'm going with I did.
I couldn't get to my unmute button.
Well, I
That's okay.
didn't unclick.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
See you in a few
Catch everybody at 1.